Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Looks like I'm in the middle of the Brahman effulgence. So I'm just trying to get my microphone together. And welcome to all of you. I just arrived back in Alachua on Thursday night. Still a bit off schedule. But because of the coronavirus, I was thinking that you're all home. Maybe we should have class every day. If you're interested. Or, I don't know your situation, but some places nobody's going to the temple. So all your association is pretty much digital. So if that's the case, we can kind of have a temple program digitally. Like chant japa together, have class like that. Some churches are doing that. They're doing digital church now because they can't invite people. Does your life look like this sometimes? You just can't seem to get disentangled. And the more you try, the worse it gets. First lecture I went to in Los Angeles in 1969 in December, and the devotee said, material life is like quicksand. The more you try to get out, the more you fall into it. So, now, next question is, I'm going to plug this mic in, but it's been sitting for 6 months in a certain mode. It's possible the battery is dead. And so I'm going to plug it in, and then I'm going to ask you if it's working or not. So let me plug it in, and then Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So my question to you is, can you still hear me? Because it's possible that it's silent now. Of course, if it's silent, you can't tell me if you can hear me. So, Hare Krishna. All glories to all the devotees. Can you hear me? Or I should write that. I can write. Can you hear me? Question mark. Done. Save. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Yes, we can hear. Okay, perfect. All right. So, it's nice to see all of you. I left Bangalore Thursday morning, about 12:30 in the morning. And then we got there early just to make sure immigration wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, it wasn't a problem because we had sent the necessary paperwork in advance. And then we flew to Dubai, which was very crowded. Bangalore was not so crowded at the airport. And then 14 hours later, we arrived in Boston, which was not very crowded. Plane was fairly empty. Plane leaving India was fairly empty. And then we flew to Jacksonville, Florida, and it was a ghost town. So, part of me wants to talk about how we see the coronavirus. Maybe that's relative. I think part of the problem is if you're in a place where it's not a serious problem, you don't realize the nature of the problem. But my sister just told me yesterday that it's such a problem in Italy, and they don't have enough beds and respirators, that they're letting the elderly people die and they're giving their treatment to the younger people. So it gives you some idea of what's happening there. Now I've been in touch with the devotees in China, and in China they've had a very strict lockdown, and they're not reporting any new cases because nobody's intermingling. But this is, it's interesting because oftentimes when Prabhupada would speak about the modes of nature, especially when he would speak about it to a reporter or someone they brought to meet Prabhupada, he would often say that the modes of nature are like a germ, like a disease that spreads. No, he used the word infection. And so you get infected by association. So if I associate with someone who's transcendental, then we get affected. I just read a story this morning about one kind of infection that happened to one devotee during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It's an interesting story. So Bhaktisiddhanta had a press in Krishnanagar, and there was this man present at the time when Bhaktisiddhanta was reviewing or editing the text at the press. And it was a section, we were reading a section, I forget what section it was, but I believe it was a section, very high section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita about Krishna's intimate pastimes with the gopis. And as he was reading, this other person could see various ecstatic symptoms manifesting on his face, different emotions manifesting on his face as he was reading, going through. Different parts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita that he was editing were invoking different kinds of emotions which were visible on his face. And this person said at that point he decided to become a devotee, seeing that ecstasy in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It just had such an effect on him. So he got affected by the virus of bhakti. There's another story I read this morning. Well, I'm off schedule, so my morning is like all night, basically. So there was another story I read. And Prabhupada in it may have been 1968, was asked about separation by Govinda Dasi. And Govinda Dasi was saying, she was asking, can you tell us something about the feelings Lord Chaitanya had at separation? And is it okay to ask that? Is that appropriate? And Prabhupada said, oh, it's a very good question. He liked the question. He answered the question. And after he answered the question, he just closed his eyes for 3 or 4 minutes and was exhibiting ecstatic symptoms. And all the devotees were silent and they were just focused on Prabhupada. And afterwards they called it the Samadhi moment. And it was another moment of infection where Prabhupada's prema was infecting the devotees. So when you become Krishna conscious, you infect people. When you're not Krishna conscious, you also infect them. When you are surrounded by pure devotees, you're infected. When you're surrounded by ordinary people, you're infected. So now we're seeing with the coronavirus how easily people get infected. But it's, in many ways, it's very similar to how we're infected by good association or bad association, or by good environments and bad environments. I posted something on my Facebook page yesterday about what Prabhupada had said about Krishna protecting you. And we know the verse, Mari Krishna Rakeke, Rake Krishna Marike. If Krishna protects you, no one can harm you. If someone wants to harm you, if Krishna doesn't protect you, no one can harm you. And so sometimes the question comes up, but what do we mean by protection? Because we just recently, a devotee in London became ill and then left his body. So one may think, well, why did Krishna allow that to happen? What kind of protection is that? And we go to the story of Parikshit Maharaj. And when he was cursed, Prabhupada said he could have counteracted the curse. He had that Shakti, but he didn't. And his thinking was, as you know the story, there was a Brahmastra aimed at Parikshit Maharaj in the womb, and Krishna protected him. There's two different explanations. One explanation was that Krishna covered his womb, another explanation was that he got a new body. Both could have happened, or it could have happened in different yugas. But Prabhupada explained the thinking of Parikshit Maharaj, and his thinking was, why should I try to counteract this curse if when I was in the womb Krishna protected me? Then it must mean that he wants me to leave this world. And as we know, it was his desire, so the Bhagavatam could be spoken. So Maharaj Parikshit totally understood that whatever was happening was Krishna's will. And so we need to think that way. And it doesn't mean we don't think in a practical way, or it doesn't mean that we do something foolish and then we blame that on Krishna. But what it does mean is that if the devotee is in difficulty, he can still see this must be Krishna's desire at this point, that I'm always protected by Krishna, and Krishna may be putting me into difficulty, which seems like he's not protecting me. I'm going to move this closer. Maybe you'll see less of that light coming in. So Krishna, one of the 6 symptoms of pure bhakti or surrender is that Goptrit De Varananyata, Krishna is my maintainer and Krishna is my protector. So when something happens, a difficulty, a devotee doesn't lose faith in Krishna's protection. He understands that this must be Krishna's desire. And so, and now we're seeing this pandemic. Pan means everywhere, like panoramic. So an epidemic that's gone everywhere. It's amazing how fast it's gone. And why is it happening? Well, one thing that I think, at least I was thinking this morning, that when we preach to people about the temporary nature of the world, and when we preach to people about that it's not all good, but there are a lot of difficulties, sufferings, troubles, miseries, etc., that it's sometimes very, very difficult to communicate that, because it's not how a materialistic person, it's not the focus of a materialistic person. The focus of the materialistic person is more optimism, how we will enjoy, we've enjoyed in the past, we'll enjoy in the future. And it's not focused, they're not focused on what's wrong with the world, but they're focused on what's good about it and what we can make better. And also, as we know, nobody's focusing on the fact that life is temporary, because to focus on that is depressing for non-devotees. So in situations like this, where the whole world is just drastically changed within a few weeks because of a virus, this microscopic entity, it actually helps us, because it shows the tentative nature of everything, how everything can just change. Your whole world can just fall apart in a moment. Prabhupada, you may have seen this lecture or this conversation in which Prabhupada said when he was 1 or 2 years old, there was the bubonic plague in India. 10 million people died. That's incredible. So these things are not in our memory, not in our lifetime, but you could imagine if we saw that, how more aware people would be. So when things materially are not good, it actually helps us in our preaching, because it makes people more aware of reality, because basically people are trying to run from reality. Because if you can create an illusory bubble in your life, you can be happy within that bubble, because ignorance is bliss. And that's why sometimes when we are speaking to people, they're not always happy to hear what we say, because we're popping their bubble and they don't want their bubble popped. It's not good news. Even spiritual teachers often teach about optimism. So optimism is not bad, of course, but they speak about optimism in a way that it creates the kind of illusion that there is that everything is great. So we see everything as great in a different way. We see everything as great as Krishna's arrangement. So we can see it this way, and you might say, well, if I get sick or my loved ones get sick, how is it Krishna's arrangement? But unless we see everything as Krishna's arrangement, well, we as devotees are kind of atheistic. Unless we see everything as Krishna's arrangement, then what are we? It's an atheistic way of seeing, isn't it? If we don't see everything as Krishna's arrangement. So, of course, Prabhupada gave us philosophy. In this post I put up, he said, it's not the doctor that heals you, it's Krishna that heals you. And only Krishna can heal you. Of course, he can use the doctor. So having said that, Prabhupada never, in another letter, he explained that to a devotee. It's ultimately Krishna who's protecting you, not the doctor, not this and that. But he told the devotee to go to the doctor, which kind of seems like wow, that's so interesting. It kind of seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? But Prabhupada's saying you have to be practical. But behind the practicality, you have to know that ultimately to be saved or not is in the hands of Krishna. So another benefit of the coronavirus, which I think everyone is realizing, and at least I feel it more than anything. Whenever there's a holiday, I don't know if you feel this or experience this, but whenever people aren't going out, a holiday where it's more like family time, people are home, there's not a lot of traffic, I always feel a decrease in the modes of passion and ignorance. Just not in the modes of passion and ignorance I'm in, but I just feel that in the environment there's a decrease. And so that's what's happening now. Because people are staying home, you can feel, I'm sure you all feel this decrease. We came in the airport, and of the thousands of parking spaces in the airport, I only saw about 7 or 8 in the area I was in taken, and there were only 2 people going through security. So it was very shanti. So, and that's good, because we may not realize it, but we're very much influenced by this what's going on in the city, this rush to make money and rush to buy and rush to get a better position. It's very subtle, and even though you may not think you're influenced by it, we have to be influenced by it unless we're transcendental. So that there'll be less of that influence now, and more of an influence like, well, the most important thing now is to stay healthy and not get other people sick, because what's the use of our advancement if we all die? So that mood is there, which is good. And of course, I think the obvious thing that everybody realizes is if we have to stay home, and a lot of people are not working or working from their home, so they don't have all that commute time, then you have more time. And so what are you going to do with more time? I think it's a great time to read and chant more, or work on some project that you haven't been able to do. Write your book. Now's a good time to write your book, the book you always meant to write. So, it's a blessing. When we went to Mayapur, first time I went, it was 1975. And the whole mood was just go there, do kirtan, and hear and chant. So that's really important. And something I've said that I wanted to underscore, that in our effort to share Krishna consciousness with other people, there's nothing better that we can do to help somebody than be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. In Mayapur this year, Vaisheshika Prabhu was giving a lecture, and he quoted Radhanath Swami. He asked Radhanath Swami, what do you think the number one quality of a leader is? And Radhanath Swami said, number one quality is to be happy in Krishna consciousness. So if we expand upon that idea, happy means that he's emanating Krishna consciousness. He has it naturally. If you have it, you give it. But not only having Krishna consciousness, but exhibiting the qualities of a pure devotee, self-sacrifice, and the compassion and so forth. I was reading something really heavy. I don't know if I should tell you, it might ruin your day. But Prabhupada was heavy, so it's my duty to represent him. And Prabhupada said, he was talking about serving Krishna to get some position, some control, some power, some influence. As we say in English, having your own agenda. Serving Krishna with an agenda, the material agenda, and Prabhupada said, if somebody does that, they're not a devotee. And I thought that's really interesting, because taking that as an example, that's not uncommon that some devotees, they want position, they want power, not solely because they want to serve, but because they want position and power. And then if we start going down the list and thinking, well, are there alternative reasons with which I serve Krishna? And Prabhupada saying, if there are, you're not even a devotee. That's not what devotional service is. So I was reflecting on that, and reflecting on this huge responsibility we have if we're going to spread Krishna consciousness, to be examples of what Prabhupada taught. And I want to segue into something that relates to this. And a devotee in India named Vipul, I don't think he's on now, was asking, could I do a series on I think, what did he say, on the value or what happens when you please the spiritual master. And I heard it once said that the best way to glorify a great person or glorify a teacher is to live by his teachings and create communities that exemplify his teaching, so people could see what he taught by your own example. And so we can apply that. If we can't create a community exactly like that, at least we can do it individually. So we can apply that idea to this question that Vipul was asking, or asking, not a question, but asking to elaborate on this principle. And I think one thing we need to recognize about pleasing Prabhupada is that Prabhupada was both liberal and conservative at the same time. In other words, he made room for everyone to serve Krishna according to their capacity. He made room for everyone to serve according to their level of realization. But there were philosophical truths that if they were at all, you see, if the preachers were at all, if we compromised those truths or we didn't understand those truths, he would be very upset. And I once asked Shridakirti, I said, what upset Prabhupada the most? And he said, apasiddhanta, which means promoting a false idea of philosophy. Because this was such a huge problem during Bhaktisiddhanta's time. And so we want to understand very carefully Prabhupada's mood and Prabhupada's understanding of Krishna consciousness, and then we want to represent that as best we can. So when you have time now you have time, and that means Krishna is giving us more time to study Prabhupada's books or study books about Prabhupada so we can better understand him, which is Like if we're going to carry on this mission, it's absolutely essential to do that. And several years ago, we were at a meeting and we were looking at all the potential problems that could surface in the future. And we're looking at problems today that would be bigger problems in the future. And so everybody listed any problem that they thought was going to handicap our movement, and they were all put on flip charts. And then we voted on those problems. And it was interesting what we saw there. Number one was devotees not reading Prabhupada's books. And I want to elaborate on that, but it's not. I'm looking for a cloth because I think my phone is dirty. Or maybe it's oh, I have an idea. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Okay. Is that better? Or worse? Or I don't know what. Let's try that. Try this. To me, it looks fuzzy. When you have light in the back, it makes the face dark. I'm losing anyway. Okay, wow, it's amazing the way this phone works. So the other one was form without substance. Form without substance means that we're focused on results, but we're not focused on internal development. So the third one is training leaders. And I think they're all related, because to be a leader, you have to have substance. And then to be a leader, you need to read Prabhupada's books. So I think now, by the mercy of the coronavirus, we can meditate on taking the time to better understand Prabhupada, better understand his mission, better understand his teachings, what he wanted. From my perspective, being a devotee since 1969 and seeing the movement grow, the one thing that's become obvious to me is it's very easy to misunderstand. Or maybe additionally I could say it's easy to forget certain standards that Prabhupada set, or to think they were time-based. Oh, well, that's what devotees did in 1975, but today it's different. Okay, in some cases, yes. But in most cases, no, it's not different. At least philosophically, it's not different. So the other problem that goes along with this, and I think we were speaking about this in Mayapur a little bit, is our material understanding of something which is transcendental. And the reason this is a problem, and listen to this, because I didn't explain it this way, but I was reading something this morning that gave me some more clarity. When you're affected by the modes of nature, that when you approach spiritual knowledge, you will tend to see it through the lens of the mode you're in. It's just like the most obvious example is that you can't understand Krishna Lila unless you're free from lust, because if you're not free from lust, you'll tend to, what do they say? What's that word in psychology? When you project. You'll project your idea on the Leela. So sometimes Prabhupada will say something, then we'll project our idea through the mode of ignorance or passion on what Prabhupada said and misunderstand it. So, it's such an interesting phenomenon, because in mundane knowledge, your state of consciousness does not affect your ability to understand something objectively. I mean, your state of consciousness, rephrase it. Your state of purity does not, it's just your level of intelligence and your focus on the material and your aptitude, that's what affects it. But you can objectively understand it. But with material qualification, you can't objectively understand spiritual knowledge because it's affected by your own purity or lack of purity. right? So, if I'm in the mode of passion and ignorance, if I'm very much affected by that, or my worldview is being filtered too much by it, then when I read what Prabhupada said, I will in some way often misconstrue it if I view it through those modes of nature. So that's a responsibility that we all have, because we're all trying to represent Prabhupada, and it's irresponsible to try to, if not that we would try to, but it's irresponsible to not keep ourselves pure enough that we can understand purely what Prabhupada's message was. And sometimes Prabhupada's words are heavy. And when they're heavy, sometimes we think, well, some excuse, some rationale. But we want to understand exactly what Prabhupada came to give. We want to understand how he applied it. We want to understand his various moods, how he applied it in various situations. We want to have as deep a grasp of the philosophy as possible so that we can share it as both succinctly, hit the target, but also broadly, so it relates to as many people as possible, so as many people as possible can understand it from whatever level they're on. That's our responsibility if we're going to share Krishna consciousness successfully, and then, as I said, to be an example of what we're sharing. These things are essentially important. So now that a lot of us are home more, spending more time at home, we can meditate on these things and enrich ourselves with understanding more clearly Prabhupada's teachings. Chanting more purely, we have more time to chant. And working on ourselves, where do we need to work, where do we need to improve, both for our own advancement, and where do we need to improve to be better, to be more effective. Now, another thing that can help us, you might say, well, I'm not that pure. Okay, we're all not that pure. But what Prabhupada's teaching us is pure. And so our job is to understand the purity and then be able to give it. And so we have to be a little bit pure to understand the purity of it so we can give it as it is. But if we give it as it is, it will be effective because it's like medicine. Right? Hare Krishna. So when you read or when you hear about ISKCON in the early days, one thing I think should be obvious is that the devotees that were spreading Krishna consciousness did not know a lot about Krishna consciousness. So many things that we know today that they didn't know. But it doesn't mean necessarily that they weren't in a better position to spread Krishna consciousness, and it doesn't mean they weren't effective in spreading Krishna consciousness, because, as we know, they were very effective. So then naturally, we have to ask ourselves, how is it that such young devotees could be so effective? And maybe today even older devotees are not as effective. Well, one thing that's very clear, or should be clear to me, and I will make clear to you, is that we relied 108% on Prabhupada because we knew so little. So we would hold on to every word, and then we would explain everything exactly the way Prabhupada explained it, and exactly in Prabhupada's mood. And Prabhupada's mood was a little bit like Bhaktisiddhanta's mood. In the movie on Prabhupada, in the beginning, he said, I've come to America to challenge the materialistic civilization, or create a revolution in the materialistic civilization. And Bhaktisiddhanta's mood was, his mood was to destroy it. Prabhupada said, create a revolution. Yeah, basically, just, you think the mood and mission of Bhaktisiddhanta and Prabhupada was to destroy materialistic civilization. That's basically it. So, in trying to destroy materialistic civilization, sometimes Prabhupada was heavy, Bhaktisiddhanta was heavy with the Mayavadis, and heavy with the scientists, and heavy with the materialists and just exposing them. Bhaktisiddhanta said, we want to preach where Maya is the strongest, and we want to destroy them. And whoever comes, we will, he said, Bhaktisiddhanta used to invite, whoever come, we'll discuss. He just we'll battle with you. So that's definitely a mood that Prabhupada had. So we don't, in the name of wanting to be relevant and adaptable and so on, which we should be, we don't want to give up this mood. And so we have to be able to know our philosophy, to be able to defend it, because it will be challenged. So that's something definitely Prabhupada wanted us to do. And if we don't study the philosophy, how will we represent it? And my daughter told me when she was on the plane, she was speaking to this man who was I guess his family or somebody was connected with Neem Karoli Baba, but she said he didn't seem to understand much about the philosophy. And they were talking, and she was saying, well, I wish I could better explain the philosophy to him. I wish I knew more. And sometimes you're in a situation where you really need, sometimes you really wish I knew more so I could explain the answer. I was just reading this morning that this one man came to hear Bhaktisiddhanta, and he was a scholar and a devotee of sorts. He wasn't a disciple. And every point that Bhaktisiddhanta made, he supported with Shastra. He had a verse for every point. And the man said it was incredible because he was talking about so many things, and everything he spoke about, he would support with verses from Bhagavatam. He said, I've never seen anything like that, and he became a devotee. So we're going back to this beginning of the movement. Devotees are hearing from Prabhupada, and they have this really crystal clear idea, and they would just go out and represent that idea, but not only represent that idea, they would represent Prabhupada's mood, which was both compassionate, soft, and also thunderbolt. And they were extremely successful, incredibly successful. And so many people became devotees. And honestly, I could say it was almost like they didn't need to hear from Prabhupada. They just had to hear from his disciples, because his disciples were his mouthpieces. And they were perfectly representing what he said. As I've often said, we didn't know anything in those days, so we could represent Prabhupada very well because we would hang on to his words because that's all we knew, and then we would present it, and the words were powerful. And even though we're not powerful, but because we had his mood and we hung on to his words, we would give that to people and it would work. So that's really important. And some of that has been lost over time, and the emphasis on learning from Prabhupada's example and from his teachings has become neglected to some degree amongst younger devotees. And even, in a sense, sometimes amongst older devotees. That's the power, that's the effectiveness of our preaching. And that's how we glorify Prabhupada. It's like, wouldn't it be amazing if someone said, hearing from you is like hearing, it was like hearing from Prabhupada, like the same thing. Of course, how would they know? They never met Prabhupada. But that's the goal, that our presence becomes so transparent to what Prabhupada is giving, and so transparent to the mood in which it was delivered, that it has this tremendous effect on people. So now you're all locked up. In some places you're locked up more, like in Australia you're more locked up. In some places the lockup is voluntary. I think in Poland it's not, in Australia it's not, New York it's not, obviously in Italy it's not, and I think a lot of places in Europe have lockdown. America is a little slow. LA is in lockdown. But I think these lockdowns are in America are vary from place to place. So it's a great opportunity to be able to really go more deeply into what Prabhupada is teaching and understand understand his mood, and try to be better devotees. Okay, so I want to go back to one thing that really concerns me that I read this morning. It's such an interesting thing Prabhupada said. As I mentioned to you, Prabhupada said if someone wants power position via his devotional service, he's not a devotee. So then, if you think of that statement, then you can think of all the other, if one wants blank, he's not a devotee. All the other things we may want that make us not a devotee. So, what does that mean? Well, basically it means a devotee is transparent to Krishna's will. And so whatever Krishna wants, he just manifests that. So he doesn't have anything personal. And if you have anything personal, desire to get from your devotional service, then it's not pure. We're reading this morning, I was reading this morning an interesting thing that Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, when there's this bubonic plague, they did kirtan, and eventually it actually got rid of it. The pure sound vibration got rid of it. And some Indians say that also, that pure sound will kill the virus. And then, so they went out, these groups were going out and doing kirtan with politicians, this and that. And he was saying, Prabhupada was saying that to chant the holy name to create some material benefit is the seventh offense, committing sin on the strength of chanting. That's interesting. So we don't want material benefit. We don't want to engage in Krishna service for material benefit. It's not pure. So devotional service means whatever Krishna wants, that's what I want. Or whatever I see or whatever I want, I engage in Krishna service, but I can't engage tamasic things in Krishna service, like the need to control and dominate and so forth. So, I can't engage my own agendas per se. I can engage my tendencies, but not my agendas. So, now's a good time to reflect on these things, because as I've often said, the goal is pure devotional service, so you can't avoid dealing with it, confronting your own lacking. You have to deal with it because it's a reality. The reality of pure bhakti is the reality of pure bhakti, and that you have to get there somehow or other. So if you have areas where your material tendencies are too strong, that has to be confronted and it has to be purified. Because that will please Prabhupada, that will please Krishna. And that's the goal, not to please ourselves. So you had some questions or comments. I have to go back and find them wherever they are. Now, one thing I can say about this coronavirus is more of you are at home. So I think we should do class every day, because if you're not going to the temple for class, we might as well have it. And there's more of you on this class than normal, so that's a good sign. I hope the coronavirus lasts longer. We'll have more. No. Most of the temples are closed out, quarantine, and gurus gave up traveling. I saw comments of some devotees, Facebook, that it's a sign of lack of faith and devotees should go out and preach. Well, what is your opinion? Don't throw caution to the air. Well, the thing is, this is an interesting question, because some devotees have written me and saying, their governments are requesting social distancing, staying at home, lockdown, and like that, and they want to go out and Harinam, because we've heard that Harinam could purify everything. But Prabhupada was, there's two issues on this. Let's just look at the public relations issue. And then we can look at the humanitarian issue. if this is how a lot of people see it, that you may have the virus and you don't know it because you're not sick. So because you're not sick, you think it's fine. People can hang out with you and they're not in any danger. But the fact is they may be, because you may be incubating the virus and you're contagious. You just don't know it because you don't have any symptoms. So that it's socially irresponsible to go out and mingle in the public because you could be getting other people sick. So that's one thing. The other thing is what the government is recommending. So now, I know lots and lots and lots of people are thinking that it's totally irresponsible when they see, like in Florida, there's groups of young people on the beach, and they're thinking this is totally irresponsible because they could be transmitting the virus. And the more you transmit it, the more it transmitted to other people. And so they're looking at this and thinking these people are irresponsible, unintelligent, and neglectful like that. So that's how we'll be seen. And it's true, the traveling preacher may be carrying the virus. So he goes around and distributes the virus, instead of Krishna consciousness. And everyone goes back to Godhead, right? Yeah, I have the virus, you'll all die, go back to Godhead. Great. So it doesn't work like that. So that's one way. And then one way to look at it from the public's perspective, like, why are you guys going out when you could be contaminated? And why are you going out when the government is asking you to stay back? And so then, from the point of view of the government, people in general, there's that view. So I could say 3 ways we have to consider. And then the 4th way is that traveling preacher may get sick, and we know the risk is higher when you're older. So what I'm thinking of doing now is we're working to devise programs online for devotees, non-devotees, like workshops, seminars, which seems especially relevant now because people are home. So now's a great time for that. So we're gonna be, so I will, I think I'll give class every morning until further notice. At the same time, we can have regular Bhagavatam class. And then I'm working with a few devotees to start doing something more systematic for non-devotees online. So, I look at it as an opportunity to force me to do that. So, extensive traveling is nice, but it's nice to stay in one place for a while also. So the traveling preachers can think, well, I get to stay in one place and go more deeply, like we're talking about, work on myself. Harish says, what if we are materially distressed? It's better to pray to Krishna than demigods. If I pray to Krishna to help me materially, am I disqualified from being or acting as a devotee? It's better to pray to Krishna than demigods. But the thing to understand is that bhakti is based on love and affection. And love and affection manifest in service and giving. Love and affection doesn't manifest in asking. Can you give me this? Can you give me that? That's, so you have to see it in the context of what you're actually doing and trying to be a devotee. And the devotee is satisfied with what Krishna gives. He does his best, and then whatever Krishna sends, he's satisfied. So that's the attitude you want to develop. Okay. Hare Krishna to all of you. Krishna Karshani says, how do we know that we really understand the message of Srila Prabhupada, the way he really meant it? I believe most of us project our conditions, Prabhupada's message, or see his message through our conditions. Well, one way is to discuss it with a more advanced devotee, someone you respect who has transcendental vision or deeper understanding of Prabhupada's message. And they can reveal. And generally you see that the acharyas or the advanced devotees, they tend to cut through a lot of illusion that we have a tendency to fall into. And misconception. Misconception is like normal in the material world. Even devotees may sometimes misunderstand something. But a lot of the there's philosophically it could be misunderstanding, or it could be misunderstanding just due to a desire to enjoy, and then we kind of rationalize or water down or misunderstand what Prabhupada's saying because it would eclipse our sense gratification, and we don't like it. And then we say things, well, you have to be real, this and that. But okay, we know we have to be real, but we can't be so real that we change the philosophy. Hare Krishna. I don't know if we have any more questions. Yes, Bhajananda. How can we see Krishna's arrangement when temples are undergoing much difficulty? Small centers especially are facing realities like having to close indefinitely or permanently. One may think it's confusing why Krishna would make it so his temples may close. Yeah, it's confusing. I think it's also... Well, let me tell a story, because I think you have two things going on here. You have Krishna's mercy and you have the nature of the material world. So let's go maybe 1974, 75, 76, I was in San Diego. In San Diego, we were distributing at the airport because San Diego was one of the main centers for the Navy. And so when the boys get out of the Navy, then they would come to the airport and they'd be going home for a few weeks. And there'd be lots of them there. And they were young and they'd just been paid so they could afford books. And most of them had never heard about Krishna, but they were kind of innocent and, generous. So they would take a book, give a donation. And the people at the airport felt we were exploiting the military boys. Because when the military came, they would get dropped off, and then we would only, when the military were there, we would only speak to them, wouldn't speak to anyone else. Because they were the ones who would take most of the books. So from their angle of vision, it looked like, well, we were just exploiting them. And they would usually give larger donations, because they just were paid, and they were just young single men. So to give $20 for them out of their $400 paycheck was not a problem. And so these people, after a while, started going up to these boys who got books and telling them that you don't want the book, and these Hare Krishnas are a cult, etc. So they'd get the books back from them. And then it stepped up to even another level where some of the workers at the airport would just harass us while we were distributing a book, or just harass us when we were standing waiting to meet people, like bump into us, give us dirty looks, yell at us. Then they were taking the covers off the books and writing on the covers some nasty things, and then taping the covers to the walls so we would see it, and tearing up our books in front of us like that. So I was thinking about it, and if you ask the question you're asking, how was this Krishna's arrangement? And say, well, you can see Krishna's arrangement in anything, but why would Krishna want people to tear up his books? We could say the same thing about abortion. How can we see it as Krishna's arrangement, or cow killing as Krishna's arrangement? Well, my understanding is it's not Krishna's arrangement. The only thing that is Krishna's arrangement is that he's allowing people to engage in sinful activity, because this is the place for it. So, we always have to factor in this reality that we are living in the material world. And the material world has its own reality. And sometimes all we can do is flow with it and make the best use of it if we can. And if we can't, it's just an unfortunate reality, an obstacle to our preaching that we're going to have to deal with. I mean, think of the devotees in the communist countries and all the challenges they went through. And then you could say it's Krishna's arrangement, but it seemed much more to be Krishna's arrangement when communism fell. And then Krishna consciousness could spread widely. So before that, it seemed like definitely Krishna's arrangement that we got into Russia, and that we met a devotee, Ananta Shanti, who became Ananta Shanti, who spread it. That was definitely Krishna's arrangement. But all the obstacles they ran into, it was glorious that they could withstand those obstacles. But to say that was Krishna's arrangement in every situation, it was more like, I would say, that was the communist arrangement. So I think we have to balance the equation. Now, sometimes a disaster may entirely be Krishna's arrangement for the spreading of Krishna consciousness, but we can't always see that until it already happened. And you could say communism is Krishna's arrangement because people were so downtrodden and so removed from religion that after the fall of communism, they were like rubber bands ready to explode towards spirituality. But in the overall sense, we can't say a government that keeps people away from religion is Krishna's arrangement, because we know government's supposed to give people religion, right? So, sometimes you can say it's you're in the material world and there are all these realities, and it may not be Krishna's arrangement, but then you look at it from the perspective of how, number one, can I take advantage of it? And number two, even if it doesn't seem like there's any advantage, number two, how can I philosophically understand it so that I can remain peaceful? And sometimes, you won't understand it. Maybe a temple would have to close temporarily, but maybe in the long run, people would become more receptive. Or maybe we need a little disaster to shake us up and maybe more people will come. We don't know. But our job, as far as possible, is to take advantage of every situation. And someone sent me this, I think it was Prada Ananda sent me this video of Bill Gates in 2015 explaining how we need to be ready for the next pandemic, exactly what we should do. And if we had done it, we would have been fine. And when I was listening to it, I was thinking that Bill Gates, he's a visionary, and visionaries see the future and they see what's coming. So I would just suggest looking at the situation now that you're in and trying to visualize how you think it will be in the future and preparing yourself for those realities. And we might say, well, we weren't prepared for this reality, but it's true, but Bill Gates knew it was coming. And I think it's something we can learn, because if you're going to be successful doing anything, you have to have some idea of the future, what the future holds. And Bill Gates completely understood it. It's an amazing talk that he gave. He made a plan. He said that, this is infectious disease is like a biological weapon. It doesn't have to be sent by an enemy. And you have to be ready to fight it. And he explained exactly how. So, see what's going on. We didn't see this coming. Maybe we should have saw it coming. And use that, what we've learned for not being prepared, to start learning how we think the world is going to evolve. And, maybe having a temple is not the ultimate preaching tactic in the future. Maybe all your energy needs to go into an online temple or online education or whatever. So, sometimes disasters, they bring us to thinking in new ways. So that's something to consider. But I hope you make it. I think the financial concern is the problem. But in America here, they're thinking of sending every adult $1,200. So that means if they do that, that means there'll be a lot more devotees around who could donate something, because they'd be getting $1,200 they didn't expect. Plus you'd be getting it also. So who knows? Then it's like you're closed down. You can't go out and distribute prasadam. The schools are closed. You don't know when they're going to open. Yeah. We're soldiers in the mission of Srila Prabhupada, and we have to, it's not easy to spread Krishna consciousness, and we have to do what we have to do. And pray to Krishna for some guidance. Okay, it seems that there are benefits of coronavirus. So many devotees watch your class. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what everybody's saying. Everybody's home, there's no class in the temple, so yeah, so I think I should do class every day. Thank you. Fernando Rico, Hare Krishna. Welcome home, thank you. I'm back. 5.5 months I was gone. I left Alachua 5.5 months ago, and here I am. Bhakti Devi, I'm not going out right now, so let's wait till the virus. Bhakti Devi is inviting me over. Today I thought that this situation will make us appreciate Krishna consciousness and our gurus more. Maybe we're taking everything for granted, like my Gurudev was coming the last 30 years to Poland for his preaching. And this year it may not happen. I appreciate the years, yeah. Every disaster has a silver lining. We can learn so much. But my realization, I've shared this before, and I would like to share it again because I think it's important. My realization during times of difficulty is a reminder of Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. And Maya's potency is to cause us to forget. That's one of her potencies, is to cover us. So covered means I don't see. So Maya's potency is to cause us to forget. And when we forget, then we kind of lose touch with the reality in which we live in the material world. So whenever there's excuse me, whenever there's difficulty, it seems the covering goes away. What Prabhupada calls this is cemetery renunciation. I think he writes about it in the 5th canto, but I was just listening to a lecture yesterday where Prabhupada was talking about cemetery renunciation. In the cemetery, at the funeral, everyone becomes very renounced. Oh, I'm going to die. But then they forget. So the words of the Guru, the words of Shastra, are to uncover the covering of Maya. But also, the difficulties in the material world, they work in the same way, because the Shastra is a lesson in words. But sometimes you need a lesson in reality. The Shastric lesson, if it comes into your reality, is more powerful. Right? I think this time of year, must be allergic to Alachua. Maybe I should wear a mask. Excuse me. So you have lessons that come in Shastra, you have lessons from the sadhus and lessons from the gurus. And then you have lessons that happen in real life, which are the same lessons from Shastra, but they happen in real life. So Shastra says, Brahma Bhuvana Loka. From Brahma Loka all the way down, Punarvarjino Arjuna, there's birth and death. Okay, we understand that philosophically. But when it actually happens, that we're confronted with death or the potential of it, it's a much different experience. And we need those experiences. And so when there are difficulties, I always use them as a reminder and said, yes, I was forgetting, and here's a reminder of what I was forgetting. And why do I forget? And Maya covers me. The covering is there so we can enjoy. We can be happy. And one way to be happy is to forget where we are in the material world and pretend that the material world is not the way it is. And then every once in a while, we find out that some loved one has unexpectedly died. You know, they're too young to die, etc. And we're in shock. And I always find this so interesting that we're in shock. I mean, it is shocking, it is unexpected, but at the same time, as devotees, we're well aware of the temporary nature of this world. So it's just interesting that we're in shock. It's just a covering. And so those shocks are reminders, well, don't be so much in shock because this is a reality. So nobody likes difficulties, nobody likes suffering, but when we're confronted with them, at least take it as a reminder, oh, Krishna's reminding me. I forgot. Maya covered me. I was thinking that there are no problems, I'm going to live forever, I'm going to make everything nice. Like you all have your plans, right? What are you going to do next month, 6 months, next year? We're going to move out of our house into a better place, then I'm going to sell my car, get a better car, then I'm going to start this new job, or I'm going to go to school, get this education, So we're all planning like, we're going to do all these things and there's not going to be any problem. Stumbling blocks. It's all just going to like work out and, I'm going to have what I want and do what I want. But when that doesn't happen, then it's just a reminder that, oh, I forgot that these things happen. And then the other thing is to remember that we need these things. Because if everything is perfect, then we are not going to want to be Krishna conscious. And like Krishna Karshani is saying, no, it's a time for appreciation. If there's a situation, there may be a situation at some point your Guru Maharaj cannot travel for whatever reason. So, but one thing we can appreciate is the internet for all its faults. All our classes are now. We can still have sangha of one another. We can still have association, although we're not personally present. But we can still have our association. And if you like, I'm getting this platform called Zoom. So in Zoom, we can see all of you and you can all talk like we're all in one room. So we can try that also. That would be fun, right? We can let you all talk. Instead of texting your questions, you can talk them. And everybody can see one another. So, anyway, I think the point, we can summarize what I'm saying here, and the point is take advantage of every situation in some way. Make it work for you. And, I have this book on Prabhupada that I meant to write. And I'm thinking I may get time to do it now. So that's a great benediction. If it's the mercy of, I can write in the book, this book is dedicated to the coronavirus because by its mercy I was able to write it. I had the time to write it. And, if President Trump, if they actually give money to everyone, then our family will almost get enough money to live for a month. Or 3 weeks or so. Yeah. That would also be very helpful in working on the book. So, there are upsides to it. And maybe, like Krishna Karshani is saying, maybe we won't take the Sangha so loosely. Now we're not getting the Sangha, so we're like, oh, I should appreciate it more than I normally do. Okay, Bhajan said I hit the nail on the head. Thank you. Radhi Manjari Ki Jai from, this is so interesting how we're all together from all over the world because of the internet for a class. Radhi Manjari's in Amsterdam. Last time I saw her in Amsterdam, I saw her in Mayapur. Last time I saw her in Amsterdam, it was 11:30 at night and it was kind of cold and she was riding home for a half hour on her bike. And I was thinking, this would never happen in America, but that's normal in Holland. Thank you for being steadily present on the online, even in difficult times. You're welcome. It's comforting, yeah. It's just, I don't know, I think it's great. I think it's great you're all home. I hope you're safe and healthy and taking a lot of vitamin C, a lot of water, getting a lot of rest. When will I be in quarantine? We'll see how the virus goes, but it's socially responsible right now, especially for someone like me who's traveled and walked through the airport in Dubai, which is kind of like the hub of so many flights, to not be in contact with anyone. We have the virus in Alachua in Gainesville, and you know how it came? It came from a dentist who was in Europe, and he came back and he was working on a patient, and the patient got the virus, and then they understood, oh, he must have got it, the patient must have got it from the dentist. Interesting, huh? And Ram Govinda says, in times like these, it's even more important to pray for safety of ourselves, other devotees, the planet, to pray for protection. Then I often think, how does praying for others even work? If someone is suffering their karma and I sincerely pray for their benefit, does their suffering decrease? Well, you know, I like this question because let's look at prayer and whose prayer does Krishna answer? And I think we know that if one's a pure devotee, Krishna will answer their prayer. Krishna will do whatever the pure devotee wants. So, become a pure devotee. We should all become pure devotees, and then when we pray, Krishna will answer the prayers. I think that's... But if you follow the example of Prahlad Maharaj in the Bhagavatam, he's praying for the welfare of everyone, but ultimately we're praying for their spiritual welfare. And it's an interesting question, because if it's someone's karma and it would be for their benefit that they go through situations, should I pray that they don't? And a devotee, you know, one answer was no, if that's what they're supposed to go through, let them go through. Another answer is the devotee doesn't like to see anyone suffer. So, you know, some of these questions are not really philosophical, because if you're a soft-hearted person, you just don't want to see people suffer, and you'll pray for everyone. Just like we see animals suffer, and you could think, well, it's their karma. But at the same time, we don't want to see animals suffer. They shouldn't suffer. It's wrong. So we can pray. But ultimately, if we want to see people free from suffering, we should pray for their spiritual benefit and the spiritual benefit of the planet. I was reading this morning how very interesting, in Back to Godhead magazine once, they had a picture of an animal being slaughtered, and Prabhupada said that picture contaminated the whole magazine. And he said it's not that we want, you know, to promote vegetarianism. We want to promote Krishna consciousness. So, you know, it's not that we just want people to be materially happy. It's not our goal. We want them to be Krishna conscious. So that's also something to consider. Sanatani, the quarantine has stopped up for a yatra in Oslo. Has stopped. Has opened up. Oh, the quarantine has opened up. We started chanting together on Skype in the morning from 5 to 7. No, she's saying the quarantine has opened up for a yatra to start chanting together on Skype. Oh, that's nice. We're on day 6 now, and participants in the group are growing. Everyone is welcome. If you're in that part of the world. I'm so inspiring, even a devotee of Barcelona. So, digital association, you know, Hare Krishna. Yeah, well, I think it shows us how important it is to associate with devotees, doesn't it? And how much we need devotees and how we don't want to be separated from devotees. Mm-hmm. Here's a Mahendra Chaitanya Das has given a link to read a quarantine Leela. What's your favorite Prabhupada book or chapter of Bhagavatam or Gita? Depends on the day what my favorite is. Because the favorite will, depends on what you're going through, what your mood is, what's relevant at that time, what realizations you're having. Because as you progress in Krishna consciousness, you have different realizations, and then different things become more interesting as you penetrate the philosophy. So I guess it depends what day you ask the question. But recently, and I can't say exactly why, maybe from being in Mayapur, I've just been reading about very high philosophy and Leela, as I feel that I need that right now, to just transcend, go really high, esoteric understandings of philosophy, and I don't say, maybe not esoteric, but very high. So that's where I'm at right now. Hare Krishna. Hari Bol Mohini. Nice to see you. Yeah. So we have a comment here. Mother Nidra says, when you pray, please help so-and-so. You add, if you will, Krishna, if it's your will. Yes, Prabhupada taught us to pray like that, if it's your will. Wonder in what light, Ananta says, wonder in what light we shall see the statement, the devotee who wants something in return for his devotional service is not a devotee. Some Srila Prabhupada's disciples asked and even pushed Srila Prabhupada to give them sannyas. They know that the title gave them a certain area to rule over, name, fame, different facilities and followers. In their turn, they had disciples who followed sincerely in spite of the fact that some of the spiritual masters left. How do you see the whole thing? I see the whole thing as that if you're sincere, you can never be misguided. Even your own spiritual master is misguided. That's both a philosophical point and a practical point that we've seen. So anyone can be misguided at any point. So we have to try to be sincere. And not let anything stop our sincerity. There's an interesting thing. I was reading this morning about these sahajiyas, and one group of sahajiyas called Saki Beki, and they dress up like women to try to enter the mood of the gopis, which seems both foolish and dishonest. And maybe you could say preposterous. And as I was reading that, I was thinking to myself, I said, I never thought of doing anything or thinking of anything in any other way than the way that Prabhupada taught me. And I've seen even amongst Prabhupada's disciples, and this also happened amongst Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples, sometimes there was a little disagreement, and they would start thinking of things or interpreting things which were contradictory to the way Prabhupada taught them. So I think there's, this cheating propensity we all have that has to be curbed. And to try to, be more intelligent than Prabhupada in understanding his philosophy, and trying to compromise. This will get us into trouble. So even our own spiritual master becomes weak or has difficulty. As long as we're sincere, we have no other agendas other than to please Krishna and Prabhupada, we'll be fine. And, the more you advance in Krishna consciousness, the more you see that Srila Prabhupada is the stability, both for your spiritual master and for you and for everybody. So that's important. We take shelter that way of Prabhupada. And we never know what's going to happen. And oftentimes the disciple even advances beyond the spiritual master. And of course, he never thinks that. But we have to be sincere, and we have to be honest, and we have to be without agendas, pure in our motivations, and we have to be chaste to Prabhupada, and we'll be fine, no matter what happens. No matter what the virus does, or what other devotees do, or what other devotees don't do. If we understand the essence of what Prabhupada wanted, and I think, one of the things that I think is really important to Prabhupada is that we're honest, we're sincere, we're serving for the right reason. And when I was speaking earlier about the success of the devotees, that's why they were successful. They may not have been advanced, but they were serving they really wanted to please Prabhupada and do what he said. And that's so important, it's so significant, because those disciples were able to spread Krishna consciousness in ways the Gaudiya Math couldn't. But objectively speaking, the devotees in Gaudiya Math were far more elevated. But somehow or other, we were able to be successful in spite of all our shortcomings, because we sincerely wanted to please Prabhupada. And so I think that really says a lot about what it means to be a successful devotee, that you don't have other agendas other than helping people become Krishna conscious and being chaste to the order of Guru, and really going deeply into the mood and mission of Prabhupada. And especially also for those of you who are younger, who someday will be older, and who may be leaders, which is many of you, you're going to be teaching other people what is Prabhupada's mood and mission, and you really need to know it and live it. Otherwise, how are you going to teach it? How are you going to share it? Right? You're welcome, Bhishma. So I think we can end now. We went almost an hour and a half. You got bonus. So we'll do tomorrow. At some point I'm going to do a class of the Chinese between 6, I think, I don't know, 6 or 7 in the morning one morning. But we'll keep going at 8 o'clock in the morning until further notice. And, Bhakti saying, did I mean that the disciple can advance beyond the Guru when the Guru falls? No. When the Guru doesn't fall. The Guru is very happy to see his disciple advance beyond him, and Prabhupada said that it's like the son can save the father. So a pure devotee can even save the Guru. Well, one thing we know is that a rascal disciple can contaminate the Guru. So a pure devotee a disciple can be a pure devotee and purify the Guru. Of course, can the Guru be contaminated? No, but he's affected by the sin. But in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Bhagavatam, Prabhupada saying, if I can have a pure devotee disciple, he will deliver me. He was saying that. So that's his humility, but it's possible also. Okay, so nice seeing you, and we will We may try out a Zoom class just to see, but I have to learn how to use it. And that provides facility to do more interactive work than me just lecturing. Okay, Hare Krishna. We'll see you tomorrow, same time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.